The Choices and Challenges Forum series was developed at Virginia Tech to explore the ethical and social dimensions of science and technology. The following presentation, taken from one of the forums in the Choices and Challenges series, is made possible by a grant from the Center for Excellence in Undergraduate Teaching. Additional support has been provided by Video Broadcast Services and the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies at Virginia Tech.
In today's program, we turn our attention to the advances that have been made in computer and communications technologies. Advances that now permit computers to be connected to each other along vast fiber optic superhighways reaching throughout the world that reduce the communication time from anywhere in the world to mere fractions of a second, that can open up vast stores of information with the click of a key, and that can link human beings together in a new kind of community, an electronic community, an electronic village. Virginia Tech's own community of Blacksburg, Virginia, is now the location of a pilot study, one of the first of its kind, to see how an electronic village might function. In dramatic new ways, the electronic village can connect teachers with students and parents, physicians with their patients, employers with their employees, and citizens with their government representatives. What opportunities does it bring? What problems or concerns can it create? What do we need to do to deal with the difficulties we see now, and how can we act now to avoid others before they arise? Our panel today will help us probe the possibilities and problems that an electronic village may bring to the different environments in which we live, and help us determine what living in an electronic village may do to our quality of life. And now, the moderator of today's program, Paul Evan Peters.
Our first guide is Steve Acker, who's Associate Professor in the Department of Communication at Ohio State University. His major research interests are in the design of new media technologies and in their implementation for innovation in education and other organizational settings. Last quarter, Steve taught a course on the topic of this symposium to 23 undergraduates, all of it using computer networks, all of it involving computer novices, and across the 10 weeks they printed exactly 23 pieces of paper, the syllabus for the course. Our second guide today is Brian Pfaffenberger, who's an anthropologist in the Division of Technology, Culture, and Communications at the School of Engineering in the University of Virginia. And he specializes in examining the effects of computers in the workplace and in business, and on the democratization of information. At your bookstore near you, he's the author of two very well-regarded new books, Internet in Plain English and the World Wide Web Bible. Our third guide is Donald Lindberg, Director of the National Library of Medicine in the Department of Health and Human Services of our federal government, and he was the first director of the National Coordination Office for High Performance Computing and Communications. He was a founding member and the first president of the American Medical Informatics Association.
I'd like to start with one of our futurists writing in the past, and that author is H.G. Wells, and the work is a 1902 book in which he describes the credible city, a place where people would want to live. Now, the size of the credible city depended on how people traveled in it. If the people walked, it could be about 2 miles in radius. If they had horses, you could travel for 8 miles. And if you had a streetcar, maybe 30. And the thing about these distances is it is about how far you could travel in 1 hour to have face-to-face communication. So even today, our city is about 50 miles in radius to be considered credible. Now, of course, even in 1902, all that moving around came at a cost. There was dirt, there was dust, there were narrow, clogged streets. You were sitting in traffic, you wasted time, you were frustrated. So as early as 1914, that venerable magazine, Scientific American, described the picture phone. And by 1939, we show one at the New York World's Fair. Now, it didn't matter that your business partner in Washington, D.C. was a blurry, shadowy haze of blue, and that you were so hot that you couldn't stand more than a hello before you had to run out of the picture phone booth. And don't let it bother you that at that time there was no mention made of this technological innovation for education. Now today we're sitting around this table facing TV cameras, and it's still pretty hot, these lights. And now we're talking about the global village and how and whether the size of that credible city has changed. My focus is education, but it cannot be pulled from the overall context of life, from the work, the politics, the health care, and the broad social issues of privacy and equity that this entire panel is going to talk about. Because you see, the promise and the threat and the choice and the challenge is how we integrate our education, our leisure, our work, and our home in our time. Think back to our credible cities. This job of the cities was to coordinate and place business, education, leisure, and home activities of us as citizens. From the time of the Industrial Revolution, we've been busy putting these activities in different places, and people go to work, people go home, children go to school, and we all go out for leisure activities. Today, the telecommunications superhighway has improved, and the interstate highways are beginning to crumble. And we talk about activity going with the person rather than moving people around in space. So I can be here in the Donaldson Brown Center. I can manage the class at the same time that I'm teaching at Ohio State. I can talk to my 8-year-old daughter about the soccer field that your drill area would work so nicely for. And I can revisit the internet-based statistics on the NIT champions here at Virginia Tech University. And you see, this is terrific for me because I'm lucky. I've got lots of control in my life. This rich telecom environment makes me tetherless rather than tethered. But take away that self-control and give it to somebody else. Give it to my boss, give it to my teacher. And under these circumstances, the opposite of untethered occurs. And instead, I'm enchained. So we're moving into cities without place, without known limits of credible distance, and it can go either way. This quality of education could dramatically improve in the electronic villa. Through the interconnected network of home, work, school, students could use their community resources to find and accelerate the learning opportunities. At early ages, students could go to the office. They could be the mayor. They could meet the elderly in their community. They could experience the agora of politics, the common meeting grounds for debate. And in this electronic villa, they would escape the over-organized childhood syndrome, where the lockstep curriculum following standardized tests takes away their educational opportunities. And in this electronic villa, in my vision, there would never be more than one computer for every 3 students, so that the pleasures of collaboration over lessons situated in modern life could take place. They would talk. And if this comes to pass, we'll find the MIT prediction that the average age of the internet user will fall from 26 to 15 by the year 2000. And the trend of personal computer sales outselling color televisions, first established in 1994, will continue, but never to the point of television sets, where we have now more TVs in our home than we have children. On the other hand, we could enter the evil age and tighten the tether that holds society. Currently, households with incomes of $50,000 or more are 5 times more likely to own the PC, 10 times more likely to have access to online services. The children of college graduates are 3 times more likely to have a PC than the children of non-college graduates. And couple that with their neighborhood schools, in which the same statistics apply. Those with access to the internet come from the wealthy and the educated communities. In this electronic evil age, we see information locks in place that open only to allow information to move one direction, and only at the convenience of those who can pay the cost of bandwidth in the electronic village. So to return to our theme, most of what we feel about the promise of our credible electronic village will be based on our sense of autonomy. Those who control their time will rejoice in the electronic village, and those who do not control their time will lose that buffer of space between their education, their work, their leisure, and their home. They will lose the last good place to hide from those in control. In education, we need to give students a sense of control And we do that through a mastery of the tools, a sensitivity of how to use their time, and a capacity to linger in surprise encounters. And we must have health. We must have ergonomic responses to physical and cognitive demands of the technology. Otherwise, we've crossed space to steal time, making a city which in the end is not credible for those who lack control. Will we reach the electronic villa or the evil age? Who knows? We probably are governed more by chaos theory than by social planning. But still, there's hope in the dialogue between technology and society.
What's a quality workplace? Well, here's what I'd like. Besides the usual stuff, good salary and benefits, not too much paperwork, not too far from the water cooler, I want to have the tools that I need to do my job well, the information I need to do my job, trust that I can do my job without, thank you, being constantly monitored. This is a respect issue for me. And perhaps most of all, the ability to close the door on my job so that it doesn't swallow up my whole life. What's the impact of advanced computer networking and the internet and the information superhighway to come on workplace quality? Well, here's the news. It's both very, very good and very, very bad. I'll start with the good news first. Computer networking can play a big role in helping you grow professionally. Imagine an electronic social field of people just like you all over the country and indeed all over the world who are coping with the same issues you're coping with in your professional or career activity. You can, using a variety of tools that exist right now, such as electronic mail and electronic news groups, you can ask questions like, does anyone know how to solve this problem? You can find knowledge resources. Is there any data anywhere that can help me on this? You can get help and support. And yes, you can even find jobs. Right now, there are more than 800 jobs advertised every day on the internet. Computer networking can empower employees to do their job better as well. In the old management style, information flowed up from an employee to a manager, and then across to another manager, and then down to an employee in some other department. With computer networking, information can flow directly between employees. People with knowledge can make it available quickly and to the people who need it. This changes organizations for the better if management doesn't fight it. Today's companies need flexible teams, not hierarchies, and computer networking can do a great job in getting the people talking who need to be talking, engineers to marketing, finance to manufacturing, and so on. Computer networking can cut time and conquer distance, too. News, reports, and knowledge circulate almost instantly throughout an organization. Teams don't have to be in the same location. They can be spread all over the country, or for that matter, all over the world. There can be tremendous payoffs in quality and productivity if computer networking is used right in this way. International Data Corporation found that they received 179% return on their investment after installing a computer network. But it requires understanding management. Managers have to be willing to let information bypass them. Last benefit here is you can work at home through telecommuting. Working at home helps the environment. It cuts down on pollution, cuts down on smog and traffic, and you can be there for your family as well while you're working. Okay, now for the bad news. You can work at home. I know I just said that that was good news. But workaholics, beware. All your work tools are right there sitting on your home office desk. The job that ate your life might in fact do so through a home computer if you don't watch out. You're going to have to ask a really hard question. How much work is enough? There's a lot of stuff on the internet too, and the information superhighway certainly, that's going to tempt you to waste time. There are news groups or mailing lists for every hobby you can imagine. Recreation, TV shows, collecting, you name it. It's all there. There are thousands and thousands of messages and things to browse through. It is just so tempting when you get bored. Having all that information available means that there's a certain temptation to waste time too on the job. But you know, you'd better not, because the boss just may be watching. A popular management application these days for use is on computer networks. I will call simply, this is not its real name, WinSnoop. And what it enables you to do if you're a manager is to display on your computer monitor screen what your employees are displaying on their screens. Okay, so you'd better not, if you're an employee, you'd better not be playing solitaire or writing a love letter or something of that nature, because your boss might know, and you won't know that you're being scrutinized, of course. Electronic mail, if you're an employee, is of particular concern. Electronic mail isn't private. You probably expect that it's going to be. There's no message that flashes on the screen saying, hey, just about anybody who wants to can read this message. But the chance is, according to some recent statistics, about 1 in 5 that your boss or someone in your organization is reading employees' electronic mail, and it just could be yours. In addition, those of us who've used email for a long time have learned, sometimes the hard way, that it has a tendency to be inflammatory. Poorly considered words come across in a cold, brutal way on electronic mail. You have to be especially civil and polite and considerate of other people's feelings. Uppercase letters in particular come across as shouting. Email can also get horribly out of hand, which is the problem I'm having right now. I've joined too many mailing lists, I've got too many pen pals on the internet, and I'm finding myself with about 175 new messages every morning to get through. At some point, you have to decide how much is enough. Email also can be a little bit risky if you haven't mastered all of the commands. For example, with electronic mail, it's possible to send a message to just one person, or to a collection of people, or even to the entire organization. And there are a number of stories of people who have written what they thought were very private electronic mail messages that wound up on the screens of every single person in the entire organization the next morning. Still, learning all you can about networking and the internet is one of the best things you can do to foster your career and professional growth. A few good rules to follow. Get on the internet and learn how to use it. Learn the rules of online etiquette. Learn how and where to ask for information. And most of all, give something back. Certainly you've got something that you can contribute. Keep in touch. Form one of these virtual communities for yourself. Find out who in your organization has kindred interests and learn how to share information across those hierarchical boundaries. But perhaps most of all, for your own protection, keep your electronic communication squeaky clean. Here's a couple of rules to follow. Would you want someone to do it to you? Watch out for what they call flaming, losing your temper, and shouting at somebody with uppercase letters in electronic mail. Would your public relations department want to use your electronic mail communications to show the public what great work your company is doing? Would you want it published in the newsletter, in the newspaper rather, after you get nominated for Attorney General? And perhaps the best rule of all, and finally, would you show it to your mother, Paul?
Thanks, Brian. Brian, I thought it was illegal for bosses and other people to read our electronic mail. Why don't the same rules that apply to paper mail apply to electronic mail?
It's perfectly legal for your boss to read your electronic mail, Paul. There's no federal law that prevents your employer from accessing stored electronic messages. In fact, in 74% of 300 surveyed companies, electronic mail monitoring was considered routine. It's just important to remember that democracy does stop at the door of a corporation. Most business owners do feel that although Americans have the right to free speech, you don't have the right to use someone else's property for free speech, and they have a right to know what's going on.
So the employment relationship is very important.
Absolutely. Still, there's a reasonable expectation that all of us have that our email communications are indeed going to be private. In the past, the Supreme Court has ruled that where such a reasonable expectation of privacy exists, then privacy regulations really ought to apply. And hopefully in the future this is going to get clarified.
Well, is it easy for me if I send a message I regret to get it back?
Absolutely not. And if you've used electronic mail, you'll realize that once you press that enter key, those electrons are going to fly off into the void, and there's absolutely no way you can recover them. Think twice before you hit that big key and send it off.
And if I delete an electronic mail message, can I rest assured that other people will never see it?
Well, Paul, that's what Oliver North thought.
Oh, really?
After he had deleted a great deal of his electronic mail messages pertinent to the Iran-Contra affair. But in fact, there's a big backup tape somewhere in the computer system's basement that contains a record of all of the electronic mail messages that you've sent and received. And they can be retrieved and read.
It's my job to insert into this very interesting conversation some consideration of healthcare. That's the area that I want to cover for you first. The first thing I think to remember is that healthcare and medicine is important. Nobody thinks more so that than I, but it really is part of the major changes that are occurring in information technology. And for that reason, I think I'll kind of telegraph you my message right at the beginning. I think that the best strategy for those who are interested in improving the quality of life in the community, electronic or otherwise, is get connected to internet to begin with. Start applications actually working. And then I would give a little preachment. I'd say concentrate quite a bit on evaluating the effects of these applications, because all of these matters aren't going to be resolved by simply theory. They're going to be resolved by practical experience. And please, for heaven's sake, report to the world the results of this evaluation. Let me skip for a moment to the role of the National Library of Medicine in support of these national objectives. We do, of course, the work of traditional library functions, but plus a lot more. Access to worlds of information through internet. We use commercial networks. We use internet. We avail ourselves of a network of national libraries of medicine, some 4,300 throughout the United States. We are supporting both research work within the library and extramural research grants. And the first category is a system called Unified Medical Language System. We try to create a terminology that will allow all of us to find information wherever it is, regardless of the word we choose, because it'll understand at least the medical meaning of terms, not general meaning. And then the visible human is a three-dimensional full voxel representation of an adult male and to come an adult female. The grants provide help for a number of ways to connect to internet, but I think the most important for this audience to focus on for the moment is telemedicine, to practice medicine at a distance. And that involves three things. It involves providing information that supports medical decision making. Secondly, it involves, I'll call it signal processing. Those signals could be blood pressure, pulse, they could be images, the picture of a person on TV. And a third thing, which is the most important of all, and I think the previous speakers have emphasized that also, it involves arrangements between people and institutions that allow you to practice medicine at a distance. So that, for instance, take into account licensing and accreditation, malpractice insurance, that take into account assuring privacy of the communication, a number of what we'll call public policy matters that I think are well known to probably to your audience. Now, in the end, we NLM concentrate on information. Primarily in the past 150 years, it's been to serve the public through the healthcare practitioners. This I'll just give a few examples of. Researching the medical literature, providing clinical practice guidelines. In recent years, we've had the courage to try to serve the needs of patients and families. Now that's more difficult. Of course, there are obviously more, if you will, people than there are doctors, but the public is much larger in number than any subset of it, and it's much harder to say things for even an educated public than it is for a set of adepts. But so our experiments are taking the form of information for patients about clinical cancer protocols, in which there's a formal section for the patient, for the doctor. Either, of course, can go either place, but at least it's carefully said by medical science writers for the public. Clinical practice guidelines, which are likewise set up with a formal section for the patient, section for the physician or the healthcare practitioner. Then in the area of AIDS information, all of our AIDS information is really designed for public consumption. All of it is free, because it would be foolish to have it any other way. And then a fourth area of toxicology in the environment, which is very, very important, but probably the most difficult of all for us to handle because its concepts are rather chemical. And yet, communities do have a great interest in knowing about toxic spills, where they've occurred, and how to handle them, and to what extent they have a liability, a danger. In closing, I would point out that, in my view at least, the grand challenge for the United States, if there were any body that were anointed and authorized to make that list, but if I were on it, I would say the grand challenge really is lifelong learning. We have to have a way to work adult learning. Even the schools are important, but the schools are in better shape than the adult population. There's no way, no really systematic way. In medicine, we call it continuing medical education. All healthcare professionals, all doctors anyway, kind of make fun of it, and we don't think we do a good job, and yet other professions think we do a better job than they. So there's a tremendous opportunity, it seems to me, in the electronic village and the connections and the high-performance computing for us to find a way for adults to continue to learn, for retread, if necessary, to the new jobs that are coming. We can see many, many people who have 2 or 3 careers. In thinking that through, I mean, every member of the community in your audience has a role to play in that. In thinking that through, I just ask that you separate a little bit the idea of information retrieval, which we do really pretty well, from gaining understanding, because we don't know how to do that with a machine assistance very well at all. We can, for instance, retrieve let's say, the correct dose of a drug to give a patient. But if we don't understand the real mechanism of the disease, let's say it's a molecular biology disease, and the doctor simply didn't have an education in that, he would have to take time to come to understand it. And we don't know really how well to use machines to do that. That is a classroom teacher-student thing. Whereas the simpler matter of information retrieval, even diagnostic assistance, we do know how to do, and I think that's a reasonable expectation for you all in your electronic village of the future.
Thanks a lot, Don. Don, while you were talking, I was thinking about, if I have access to electronic resources of medical information that previously only physicians had access to for one reason or another, to what degree will I be able to become my own doctor?
Well, not a sufficient degree. Actually, most in the medical profession are very strongly in favor of providing information to patients. I mean, I think we know that in the case of chronic illness, patient education is probably the best thing we do for the patient. So I don't think there's anyone resisting that. The activated patient is probably the last frontier. Think, for example, of the business of taking or not taking medications, doing or not doing the exercises. I mean, who's deciding that? We as the patients are deciding that, not as doctors. Think about the disgracefully low level of immunization in our children. I mean, that's a family and a community issue. That's not a doctor issue. So we're in favor of you getting all the information you can through the internet or otherwise.
This questioner noticed that you, Steve, referred to an MIT prediction that the average age of participants in the network on the information highway will drop to 15 years old by the year 2000. I think that was, in fact, your prediction. Then on the other hand,
MIT prediction of median age.
I should say an MIT prediction that you shared with us of median age, 50% of the users will drop to 15 years old. And yet we have this very strong thread, which Don Lindberg spoke to most directly, that the greatest grand challenge of all will be lifelong adult learning. So how do we square these two things? Do we really have to wait until the Nintendo generation is in charge? Or will we be able to make meaningful progress on lifelong learning between now and then? Don, would you like to respond to that?
As a matter of fact, the Nintendo metaphor is used with respect to surgery. Because, you know, surgery, as most of us know it, most of the audience even knows, it has to do with people in masks and gloves and hands and palpation and those kind of skills. Whereas surgery is changing very, very rapidly to surgery done through scopes, you know, with fiber optics and TV at the other end, so that in fact what you're looking at is a two-dimensional image.
Yes.
As for instance in doing arthroscopic surgery on joints and so forth. So that type of procedure is being called Nintendo surgery, because you don't feel anything. You're just looking at a TV screen and operating a manipulator. So that involves a total retooling of the skill set of an experienced surgeon, and it is a really threatening process, let me tell you. So that's a lifelong relearning that's happening right now today. And more of the same will occur, of course.